So before y'all get excited, I'm still on hiatus. Let me clarify that. But I did want to drop this special, I guess we could call it an in-between season bonus episode. I don't know. I'm just here on the mic about Netflix Black Barbie. Okay, to give context, the documentary is something that I've been waiting to drop for quite a while since the announcement was made. The documentary premiered at South by Southwest, which is like a big film thing, right? And I've had it on my radar since then. It dropped on Juneteenth. I was planning on watching it on Juneteenth because your girl was off, as we all should be, reparations. However, I was just getting back from Quebec. If you want to catch that recap, go ahead and head over to my Instagram at PinkDollStyle or my TikTok, aka the Clock app, at Pinky Creates to see the recap and also some photos. So that is part of the reason why I'm just now getting around to on Saturday, July 22nd, which is also Cancer season, getting around to watching this documentary. The documentary was produced by Shondaland. And if you don't know who Shonda Rhimes is, by the way, Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, Annalise Keaton, aka The Walk, The Wig, How to Get Away with Murder. You know, one of the best shows that have been produced of all time. And we're not even talking about the full scope of her work. Let's add in Bridgerton, which did we watch the second half of? Sorry, that's not why we're here. But anyway, Team Penelope. But I wanted to watch this documentary because I knew whatever was being supported by Shondaland was going to be phenomenal. And I was not wrong. For those of you who have not had a chance to watch it, I'll try not to spoil it too much, but I really want you to sit down and whether you're within the culture or outside of the culture, really sit down and think about the impact that one doll can have on how we perceive ourselves. This episode won't be too long, just a quick high-level recap, so corporate of me, to talk about the documentary. So, for context, the Black Barbie documentary was all about the impact of 3 Black women at Mattel. For a lot of us who are millennial babies, millennials stand up, we had Barbies growing up, and I never thought about the impact of this as a child, but me having a Black Barbie definitely shaped in my perception of how I saw myself. And my mama, hey mama, she always made sure whatever Barbie I played with looked like me. Even telling one of my aunties when she gave me a white doll to take that doll back. Yes, she did. She surely did. But my mom, because of the time period that she grew up in, my mom was born in the early 60s. So that time period was, the civil rights movement. You had the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education happening about less than 10 years before she was actually born. So my mom was born at a pivotal shift in American culture. And going back to Mattel, you would never think that a Barbie would have the political influences that it had, which we'll get into that, and also the cultural influence that Barbie had on not just my mom and her generation, but my generation and future generations as well. So to tell the backstory, a lot of us did not know, and I found this out in the documentary, that the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which was a decision to remove segregation from schools. Remember Ruby, I can't think of her name, but the little girl who was escorted by, I think, the police or a higher level of the police into school for being the first Black child to integrate an all-white school. That decision was influenced by the Supreme Court due to a psychological test conducted in the 1940s by Dr. Kenneth and Dr. Mamie Clark, who designed a series of experiments known as the doll test to study the psychological impact that segregation had on Black children. And this doll test used 4 dolls to identify the dolls. Only thing that differentiated them was their color. So the dolls looked identical down to the features, right? The only thing that was different was the color. And the children's perception of race even then was dismal. It was abysmal. It really was. These kids, I'm speaking more so from a Black girl perspective, but these little girls did not see themselves as beautiful. They saw the white doll as beautiful because that was considered the standard. Let's hold on to that. That experiment was one of the pivotal things that helped to make that decision to end segregation in schools. And if you think that I'm lying, they actually note this in a documentary. Fast forward, this connection between self-esteem and toys, we were introduced in a documentary to Miss Beulah. She was the first black woman to work at Mattel Corporate. She started off as an assembly worker. She actually lied on her application saying that she was 18. I love that generation. They did what needed to be done to get them jobs, honey. But she wanted to get her foot in the door and ended up working in Mattel Corporate later because the creator of Barbie, who's mentioned in the movie, she really liked her, and Beulah's personality allowed for her to enter that space because of her likability and her ability to make people feel comfortable around her. Now, I know a lot of us may like to tussle when it comes to this, but I will say it out loud. I lean into the fact that when it comes to me being a black woman, I lean into my likability in entering spaces. I do, because I understand the impact my likability can have on me moving forward, whether it's with people of my own culture or people outside of my culture. And if you are likable, you can get the job. If you are likable, you can also move up in the job. If you're likable, you're allowed to do more things because they think that you're someone who's capable of getting the work done. That should not be a factor all the time that weighs heavily on your experience. However, it does help. So Beulah used that to her advantage to move into the corporate space at Mattel. Fast forward to that, Beulah's entry into Mattel Corporate set the foundation for Miss Kitty. And Kitty was the first black designer at Mattel. She, and just like black women or black folks in general, she answered a blind ad for a designer at Mattel. And the goal was for her to present one design. Miss Kitty said, no, ma'am. We know we got to be twice as good to get half. So Miss Kitty came back with multiple designs and ended up getting the job. And the idea around Miss Kitty as well was that she even looked like a Barbie herself. But even before then, before Miss Kitty started at the company, Miss Beulah and other, black women who eventually became part of the assembly line were telling the creator of Barbie that there needed to be a black doll, that there needed to be representation, because at the time there weren't any choices really out there that were not homemade for little black girls to play with, or just black children in general. And so between 1960 and 1970, Barbie, or Black Barbie, was introduced as a friend named Christy and Julia, who was inspired by the one, the only, the mother, the one of one, Miss Diane Carroll. If you don't know who Diane Carroll is, please do your research. Diane Carroll, Dynasty, Diane Carroll, the first black woman to lead a major TV show called Julia, and also known as Whitley Gilbert's mama for us elder millennials. But those two dolls were inspired to create these Barbies, but those were not considered Barbie. They were considered Barbie's friends or sidekicks. And a lot of criticism around that as well was they didn't create these Barbies to really match the actual features of black women. They essentially, again, deep Negro spiritual sigh, they took a white doll and made her black. And while every step towards progress is a step towards something, there was a lot of blind spots considering why this was not the way to go. While it was appreciative, it was done, it was not a full representation of black women, and also given the ability for black girls to see themselves. Now, Mattel did admit, when they did launch the Black Barbie later in 1980, And mind you, for us elder millennials, 1980, so I was born in 87. That doll came out 7 years before I was born. When they finally did get around to designing Black Barbie, which was designed by Miss Kitty, inspired actually, the outfit was inspired by Diana Ross. Mattel admitted, and this is why marketing is so important, it always goes back to marketing. Mattel admitted that there was little to no promo materials to promote the doll. And as much as we scream from the rooftops all the time about representation mattering, we can get the representation, but if it's not being amplified in a way that allows for us to be seen, that allows for that product or whatever messaging to be amplified, whether it's through social media, commercial, print, advertising, I don't care if it's a post from your mama on her Facebook account, something has to be promoted, right? When you don't put any push behind it and pull every lever possible to talk about it, while at the same time normalizing that this is part of the overall story instead of just a sidekick or a one-off, of course something is not going to be successful. And that goes for anything, not just for this Barbie that we're talking about. So Mattel admitting that is actually a big deal, because a lot of times companies will try to put the blame on the consumers not wanting the product, which is not true. Marketing and advertising and PR, it is a trifecta, but marketing, advertising, and PR have a huge impact on what we see, what we consume, what we normalize, what we purchase and support. And when you don't take the time to actually create something to make it so that people feel seen in the messaging and included, of course no one's going to support it, right? Of course no one's going to want to put their dollars behind it. And it's unfortunate. And that's also part of the reason why, for me, I love watching these documentaries, because it allows for me to see and understand that what I do does have a purpose. What I do does have impact. And for me, working in marketing, that's not just something that I take very lightly, because I am part of that generation that grew up seeing very limited versions of myself. And again, shout out to my mama. Shout out to her for always making sure whatever toys I played with looked like me, had different variations of skin tones. I remember actually my first doll was not a Barbie. If you guys recall, there was this doll called Kenya. And when I was little, I remember the jingle to this day. It was Kenya, my doll Kenya. Um, because she's pretty, makes me feel pretty too. Like, I remember my Kenya doll. My mama still got it in her basement. She missing all her clothes. She just got that pink leotard. I'm sorry, Kenya, I lost all your clothes. But I remember how beautiful I felt, how seen I felt. And I didn't realize that it was so tied to that doll having a similar skin tone as me. But going back to my original point, there's a reason why marketing is needed in these spaces, right? There's a reason why a lot of these, programs or things that are considered diverse and inclusion initiatives sometimes fail, because while the company is putting up, they're not putting up the dollars to make sure that these things actually become successful. And then they blame that on the lack of, oh, well, we didn't see any sales behind it, but also you gave me an abysmal budget to pull something off. So how was it supposed to be successful? A lot of times companies, truth tea, no shade, use that as an excuse to say, we try, we're not going to do it again. So that way they can't get their hands slapped and saying, oh, well, we tried to do this, but no one took advantage of it. No, you didn't support it. And that's why it wasn't successful. But getting back to Mattel, admitting that they were the problem and the drama, just to think about it, in 1991, the designer, Kitty, she had a predecessor who came up, underneath her team. And actually, shout out to Kitty for this too. Kitty brought on additional Black designers for these dolls to build her team out, and ended up getting her own division, a special division, which ended up creating dolls for, the AKA 100th celebration, creating dolls that celebrated diversity and inclusion, in different areas, and even doing things like creating this spin-off doll called, I think it's called Sis. And the Sis sis or shiny dolls. They were released in 1991. Again, millennials, stand up. We came up at a great time for these toys. But these dolls were more realistic about our culture, right? These dolls were inspired by things like In Vogue, never gonna get it, never gonna get it, woo, 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 woo. Sorry, I had a moment. But these dolls were inspired by cultures that we could identify with. And more importantly, these dolls were actually marketed correctly. And I love the fact that because these dolls were promoted correctly, they were given their own advertising spots, advertising dollars. Guess what, y'all? Guess what happened? They were successful. Don't you love that for us? Look what happens when you really support the culture. But I really think that there needs to be a deeper conversation in the fact that even today, we had so much movement, which often happens. We had so much movement with Black designers being part of this team. But today, Mattel actually struggles with not having any Black designers on their team. And it goes back again to you can't be what you can't see, right? And again, as someone who works in a space that's very important to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as a Black girl in marketing and now a Black girl in STEM, because I work in the sciences in marketing, I really take what I do seriously in making sure that we are included in the conversation. And a lot of times that work that's being done behind the scenes by those who are moving the needle forward, it is a lot of groundwork that is being done. And sometimes you don't see any progress until maybe 5+ years after you started doing the work, because there needs to be so much change that happens internally before it starts to be reflected externally. That being said, though Mattel does not currently have Black designers on their team, they are trying to do the work. They are trying to build more diverse voices, whether it's through the corporation. They have something called a FLIP program, which is Future Leaders Innovating Play. And 3 graduates who have been part of the program have become part of the Mattel team since the program has launched, which is really great. However, there is amplification that's been being done right now to making sure that the Black characters or any diverse characters specifically at Barbie in the Barbie universe are not seen as sidekick characters, because that is a criticism. Even to this day, there has been a study done recently that's similar to the 1940s doll test, in which they did a similar study about dolls and perception. And Barbie, the Malibu Barbie, is still seen as the main character, and the Black or diverse Barbies are still seen as sidekicks. And when you look at the current Barbie universe with the animated series, the Barbie, movies that are on TV, it tracks. It does track. Barbie has this very amplified presence, and then her Black or diverse characters are maybe given 1 or 2 lines and not really seen as main characters on these shows. There was even a thing mentioned in the documentary by the head of DEIR about how they did a whole Barbie universe when they had Barbie meet another Barbie who had the same name as her. However, the criticism of that movie was the Black Barbie, who was part of this arts program that the other Barbie was also entering, was clearly the most talented one there, clearly had the credentials. And here you have Malibu Barbie, who did not have the same credentials and talents as the Black Barbie, but was on the same level of playing field as the Black Barbie. And whether you want to call a spade, we can go ahead and we could tussle all day long about this. There are facts behind that. There are facts behind the fact that Black women have to always perform twice as good to get half. Mediocrity in a lot of spaces is rewarded when you are outside of the culture, when you are not a Black woman, when you are not a person of color. But I'm going to speak from a Black woman's perspective. When you are a Black woman, you have to be twice as good. I don't care what nobody says. You can have degrees coming out your wazoo, but you will still be compared to someone who maybe doesn't have as many degrees as you, doesn't have as much experience, but is given a chance because someone sees her potential. Whereas you've been working your butt off for years in your career field, just trying to get to the level where you deserve to be, trying to get the pay that you deserve to have, and you are still fighting for that place, and someone else has been able to rise the ranks a lot quicker and get to the position that you deserve to be in, but still do not have the opportunity to do because either the connections weren't right or someone doesn't see the work you did as valuable as the person who was mediocre. Mediocrity plays a huge part in the progression of our cultures, to be honest with you. And it's a shame that it's still being reflected even in something as should be simplistic, but as a toy, as a Barbie. But these toys are also shaping how we see ourselves, right? Because Mattel was brought under fire with the type of career choices they were giving Barbie at first. And that has expanded, and they definitely have expanded things like body shape, hair texture, hair color, different abilities of Barbie, having Barbies who wear hijabs, having Barbies who, may be in a wheelchair, or, just different things like that. So they have made progress. However, there are many blind spots that Barbie, other toy makers, or just in general have when it comes to true idea of what diversity and inclusion means. And for those of you who think I'm so sick and tired of hearing diversity and inclusion, I'm sorry, but diversity and inclusion needs to be spoken about, because it is not something that is insert diversity or black person here or whatever category here. Diversity and inclusion should be included in the broad scope of a conversation. And unfortunately, it's gotten such a bad rap in recent years due to DeSantis, down in Florida, or other people who are looking to dismantle what they think are lies that are being projected about history to project this idea of a white ideological story of the white savior complex. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's unfortunate that even down to the toys we play with, we are still being impacted by that. We are still impacted about how we see ourselves, and children, they are aware that the differences do exist. While they may not call it race, they know different things like black girl magic. They know how they should be treated by, people or political figures or people in positions of power. They understand that. So while they may not know exactly what race is, they know the context around it. So we're going to wrap this up with a big bow because we're about to hit 20 something minutes, and I wanted to keep this short. Plus, I got to be outside again tomorrow. I'm taking my mama. We're going to the Kennedy Center to see the Disney Orchestra experience. I love that for us. And I want to give myself time because the heat is 100 degrees in DC, and my hair is looking crazy right now. So I got to get my life together. But anyway, to close it up with a big bow, I wanted to bring this up doing this special episode to talk about how Barbie has impacted PinkDollhouse. So I don't think I've ever really shared the story of PinkDollhouse on this podcast or in general. But when I was little, you can go to my Instagram if you want to see it. But when I was little, I had a Barbie dream house. I was 8 years old. I'll never forget this. I was 8 years old, and one Christmas, I had a Barbie themed Christmas. Well, I'm telling you, I don't know how my mama did it, but she found every black Barbie possible. I had gymnast Barbie. I had Barbie convertible. I think she had 2 cars. Yes, good credit. But I had everything Barbie that Christmas. But more importantly, I had the Barbie dream house. And that Barbie dream house, I credit as the beginning and the spark of my creativity as a creative. And later on, I decided to call my business PinkDollhouse Marketing because I wanted to be that spark of creativity for those who were small business owners or fellow creatives who were looking for someone who can help them, think through their strategy or their brand voice. That Barbie dream house was that for me. I don't know if PinkDollhouse would have existed without Black Barbie, to be honest with you. Because me having those Black Barbies, even my Black Ken dolls, allow for me to enter this space into my imagination where nothing was limitless. Nothing was undoable. I could be anything I wanted to be through those dolls, right? And my Barbie dream house was a 3-story dream house with, again, 2 cars, and she was fabulous. Ken slept on the couch because her name was on the house, honey. And I was just thinking about that while I was watching the documentary, that if these 3 Black women who worked tirelessly to make sure we felt seen did not do the work behind the scenes, I don't know if Pink Dollhouse would be a thing today. I maybe would have had still a Barbie dream house. Maybe I would have had Barbies. But in terms of actually seeing myself and seeing the untapped potential that I had through my creativity, I don't know if that could have happened without having those dolls that looked like me. So to wrap it up with a big bow, I just want to make sure that we understand the impact that toys can have on how we see ourselves and how we can see and possibly change the world through the future work that we do. But more so, the final question I want to leave the audience before I go right back on hiatus is, how much of the work is on Mattel or other toy makers to dismantle negative perception of skin tone, and how much of the work and the weight lies on the parents or the influential figures in the children's lives to also do the work? Sit there and think about that one. Maybe we'll talk about it when I come back from hiatus in the fall. I might give you something between then. I haven't decided yet. Okay, bye. Coffee with Yvonne is produced and edited by Yvonne Pearson. Coffee with Yvonne is created by PinkDollhouse Marketing. You can catch the latest episodes by subscribing to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.